I met a dude when I was in the British Virgin Islands who worked for a big tech company. I don't want to say the company, but it's like a major company that, like, they make like fucking jets and shit for the military. And he just was like, I don't see this. I don't see this just doesn't seem like a good path for the rest of my life. He goes, I'm seeing all these people that were managers and executives that are trying to work their way up the corporate ladder, and everyone's miserable, everyone's exhausted, everyone's overworked. They're all putting in crazy hours. They bring work home with them. They hardly see their family. They make a lot of money, sure, but he was like, fuck this.
Hello.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Please try again.
Let's try this one more time. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Anderson with the Escape from the Cubicle podcast, and joined here with our last guest, Zach Trinner, who is now joining the podcast as a co-host and a regular part of the show. So very excited about that, and glad to have you, Zach.
Yeah, you had a runaway mic right there.
I do. I'm trying to tighten this thing.
Yeah, I had so much fun. I figured I'd stick around and see if we could do this thing for real.
So
I'm
how
excited about it.
work the mic stand.
Yeah, exactly. It's my expertise. It was on my resume.
Perfect. Well, look at it. It's not moving now. We're good. Thank you for your help. Oh, great. Well, we recorded earlier today a interview with Michelle Tran. We think you're gonna like it. Michelle is very accomplished, very interesting person that I've met and worked with professionally over the past few years through a couple different roles. First off, she's well regarded and has a few different recognitions. First, she was named Fintech Magazine's top 100 women in fintech, Innovate Finance's Woman in Finance of 22. She was a standout 45 in 2021 and 2020, listed as Primary Ventures Who to Know in New York City. She was the founder of Women in Fintech New York City, recognized in Asian Hustle Network's top 50 unsung heroes in 2023. And she's worked at a variety of enterprises like BlackRock, Vestwell, and has started a few different companies of her own or been part of startups. And currently she's working on something that will help those of you thinking about going out and starting your own company, but maybe you don't have the chief marketing officer or CRO, or some other C-suite function. It's essentially an outsourced C-suite company. So I thought that was very interesting. And she also shared what she's doing with a company called Summer, where they're working to help students reduce their student loan burden. So professionally working on some really interesting things. But there was a few takeaways I had, Zach, but what were yours from that discussion?
So I think there was a couple of takeaways. One was, we had mentioned work-life balance. Like, when you're that accomplished and you have 4 kids, that in and of itself is award worthy. So we were able to ask, like, hey, how do you balance that? And she quickly, it's a subtle change, but she quickly was like, hey, it's not really balance, it's juggling. Like, I'm wearing a bunch of these hats. There's a label on each one of these balls that I'm juggling, whether it's mom, CEO, founder, coalition builder, with all of those accolades that she has. Like, how do you do that? And it's not a balance, right? It's never going to be equal weighted. It's something's always in the air. There's always something moving. So it was really, for me, one of my biggest takeaways was just that subtle shift from, it's not a balance, it's a juggle.
Yeah. You don't have to be perfectly balanced. Sometimes you just focus on what's burning at that time. But
yeah,
eventually.
What about for you? What was one thing that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think the juggle versus balance, but I think for me it was the building a team and kind of like in your interview is having that network around you, that support system. In her case, it was having her mother around to help with the kids. Professionally, it was through Crest Collective and helping founders and business owners to build that network to make their business successful, right? You can't build a team. You can't do everything all on your own. People only have, a limit in brain capacity and limit on really how specialized you can be at many topics at once. And so having that kind of ability to build out that network, which was a big takeaway from yours too.
Yeah, I think another thing that stood out to me was from an athlete's viewpoint, you are responsible for the way your body moves on the field, and that's essentially how you keep a job or not. Pretty siloed. It's on you. You're working with teammates, but ultimately it's your individual performance. When you get to the business world, like if you try to do that, you're gonna have so many false starts. Like if you don't have a Crest or you don't have like Michelle's team or support system, you're just not able to do what you want. Like if you want to actually execute on something, you're going to need that C-suite. You're going to need advisors. You're going to need support system. And I think that was one thing that stood out for me was Michelle's like, well, you got to solve a problem. That's a problem for athletes going into the business world, is thinking you can do it all yourself. Like you got to build out the team. And if you haven't done the legwork in the off season, you're starting from scratch. That's pretty tough. So that was one thing that stood out for me as well.
I think that's a challenge for not just athletes, but really all high performer, highly successful people, because you have been so good at, whatever it is that you've chosen to be an expert in. You just can't be great at all of it. So yeah, I think that's the key takeaway, and really balance versus or juggle versus balance is a key one too.
Mm.
Well, so hope you all enjoy this episode. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining, everyone, and welcome to Escape from the Cubicle podcast. Today we are joined by Michelle Tran, who has many titles, so we'll let her get into that. But Michelle's someone I've known for a few years, both professionally and personally. She's a great person and has really accomplished quite a few things in different categories, I think, and really focused on fintech. So we thought she'd be a great person to come on, given her experience at firms like BlackRock and Vestwell, and now what she's doing now. And I'll also point out Zach from the last episode has joined us, and he'll be a regular part of the show going forward as the co-host. So we're excited to have Zach as part of what's going on, and think that he brings a lot to the table. So very excited. And Michelle, you get to be the first one with both of us. So with that, Zach, anything you want to say before we kick off?
No, I'm really excited. And so if you notice, Michelle, we were talking beforehand, and then I always make fun of my wife because she does the same thing. She has this ordering voice or a phone voice. So Josh was talking very casually to you, and then we get rolling, and now he has this nice formal ordering voice. So let's get into it, though. This will be a lot of fun.
I love it. Cool. Well, Michelle, why don't we start off? Just tell us who you are and what you do, how you got there.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm so honored to be part of this conversation. And yes, I do have probably a Zoom voice, an ordering voice, one of those voices as well. It drives my husband insane. This is why we don't share an office. So Michelle Tran, my background, really where I focus on is all areas of financial services and fintech. So my career journey has really gone through more traditional finance, and now is more deeply rooted into fintech, financial technology. My goals throughout, when I think about my career also, is what is the impact that I have within not just an organization, but more broadly in the world. And so I tend to look at a lot of companies that are, really trying to help the individual at the end of the day. And then kind of how do they help, right? Do they help them invest quickly? Do they help them retire or save more for retirement? I'm currently leading commercial sales and marketing for a firm called Summer. Summer is helping those who have student loans figure out how to forgive those student loans or consolidate and reduce the student loan amount that they have. And that's all through these really complicated government programs. So it's a great technology to help. And as you can imagine, some people have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans. And you can imagine if they get their loans forgiven, they can pay for a house, they can go on vacation, they can start saving for retirement. So there's so many things that we can talk about in terms of how big a impact kind of loan and debt has on an individual and their ability to create wealth. I'm also super passionate about women in fintech. So I'm also the co-founder of NYC Fintech Women. So we're a 12,000 member organization, primarily based in New York, but now I'm sitting in California. And our mission really is to empower, connect, and promote women in fintech. And similar to financial services, it's, fintech is still kind of a not necessarily just a boys club, but it's just more heavily male dominated. And so there's a lot of benefits for women to come together. We're doing some really cool stuff in this space. I'll throw out there too, since Josh asked, I do have a gaggle of children, but wanted to say that, that's important to bring up because a lot of this conversation too is, all the different things that I do, but that's a big part of also what I do is, my 4 children who range from the ages of 9 to 2. And they're all crazy and they all create this cacophony of noise in the house, and it's a mess of a house, but it's fun and crazy and awesome at the end of the day.
Well, Zach and I can relate to that. We both have 2 girls, about 3, 1.5, 2-ish on the younger side. And then we both have 1 on the way. So when you get home, it's very loud and crazy. That's for sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, this is the calmest part of our day.
Yeah, that's the truth.
But that's actually a great place to start is how do you balance the home life versus being successful in the business world and try to be a little tactical too. Like we were talking earlier, like if we don't get up before the girls, it's hard to have a productive day. So could you just give a couple of tidbits on how you're able to make that work?
100%. And, again, I think the word is juggle versus balance because it's never fully balanced ever. It's always one side or the other, or kind of like one gets, kind of shortlisted versus the other. So very tactically, one, I love working. Like for me, I have tried, and no knock on like women who stay at home or moms who stay home, but I tried, and it is the hardest job of all time to really give yourself 100%. And I am so appreciative of the folks that can do that. For me, where I really love is the ability to impact the world in a different way. So tactically, what I do is I actually work East Coast hours. So I'm on the West Coast. So I actually get up around 5:30 every morning. And I'm at my computer and working by 6, so I can get a good 3-4 hours in before the craziness of the kids come. And then I block my calendar very specifically between the hours of 7:45 and 9 a.m. Pacific, so I can help them get out the door because they all go somewhere, and help them, get breakfast and all those things. I will also admit that my mom really helps out. So she is the reason why I can say, wake up and then be focused for a good 2-3 hours on work before having to dive deep. But look, I really love that structure because what actually happens on the back end in the afternoon, and I have, 2 older boys who have a ton of stuff that happens in the afternoon, sports, you name it, math. So I can really stop my meetings by the time that they're done and really help them for a few hours in the afternoon. So that's one thing. I will say also, I travel a lot for work. So when you say, hey, this is your rest time for the day, everyone's like, oh, I don't know how you travel with so many kids. I was like, it's great because I get to go to a hotel room and just sit there by myself and not have to do any of the kid stuff. But really, kind of what does that mean at home though? Like, so my mom helps out, my husband helps out a lot. But then also just really pulling into the community. I also do have to learn not to put my kids in too many things because that's part of the problem right now. I sign them up for all these amazing things and then I'm not there to help them with any of it. So that's one lesson that I am learning currently. But it's a lot, right? And it's I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love that my sons and my daughters see me working and they see me traveling. I took my 7-year-old to New York with me last year. And I took him to a number of New York City Fintech Women event. I took him to a conference that I was at. And his question at the end of the day when we landed back in California was like, how come there are no men in fintech? I was like, that's great. Like, I love that he's asking that because right now he's just seeing women in fintech, right? And so they asked the same thing about International Women's Day. They're like, how come there's no International Men's Day? I was like, well, that's a long story. That's the rest of the year. We get one day. But I think, there's a lot of juggling that happens.
Definitely. I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. The last recording was having a network that you've built around you that supports you and helps motivate you and kind of picks up for you when, you need that extra hand, if you will. So it's great that you have your mother locally. My in-laws moved from Massachusetts right after our first was born to help out. So I know that's a big burden lifted on my wife. Makes it a little easier when they can pop over for dinner when I'm on the road, for instance.
Yeah, it's a huge help and forever grateful.
Mhm.
But then I also have like a long list of sitters that I can call, and then friends who like pick up. And that's the community effect, right? Like building folks, it takes a village. It really does. And so having that village is super important.
So now that your kids are kind of at the age where they're starting to think, hey, I want to do this when I grow up, have you seen any of them take interest in fintech or finance? How do they feel there?
I would say not yet. I think, my boys are in they are very financially motivated, I'll say. They're always asking for money and they're young. So maybe that's part of it. My older one wants to be a YouTuber. So he is, very on this road of how do I make a lot of money being a YouTuber? Which for me, kind of being first generation Asian, I'm always like, oh, you're supposed to be a doctor, you're supposed to be a lawyer, you're supposed to go in these like traditional roles, finance. And then here I have a kid who's like, I have to be on YouTube and all social media platforms. So we're navigating that right now. So no fintech, unfortunately, or social
Yeah.
media.
Well, maybe he can be a fintech influencer on YouTube.
A finfluencer.
I think that's interesting too, that
No.
I
Can you guys
saw a
hear me? I'm
list of the
paused.
top careers. Oh, you're back. We can hear you.
Okay.
You cut
All
out
right.
for a second though.
Okay. Sorry,
All
let's
right.
start over.
But yeah, I saw a list recently, Michelle, of by country top jobs that like high school kids were aspiring to. And in the US, YouTuber, social media influencer was at the top. And you go look at, I think China was astronaut, engineer, doctor. So very interesting how you see like our culture really kind of put so much weight on social media these days. And it's really impacting how kids want to kind of live their life and what they want to be when they grow up. Now, I would argue there's probably going to be a saturated market for YouTubers. So, maybe you learn coding or how to sell or something in addition to being a YouTuber. To each their own.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that I'm trying to like push him to is storytelling because that's super
I think we lost you
beneficial.
for. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
you're
So the one
back.
thing
Yep, you're back.
Okay. The one thing I'm pushing him into is storytelling. Like if he wants to be a YouTuber, you have to learn how to tell a story, right? You have to be able to present yourself, which applies to every job that you have, regardless if it's, financial services sales or in technology, you have to be able to tell your story. So hopefully at some point I can, kind of steer him down the right road and not only be a YouTuber, but, use his storytelling skills for something else, but we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's great. Well, so let's transition. I know you were at BlackRock. Tell us about your time at BlackRock, what you did there, how that led you to Vestwell, and then kind of eventually to where you are now.
Yeah. So I was at BlackRock for about 10 years in various different roles within the iShares ETF business. I was in different sales roles, sales leadership roles. And so I'd spent time in San Francisco, in Hong Kong, helping them break into private banks in Hong Kong and Singapore for a couple of years. And then it was given the opportunity to really focus on fintechs for iShares. And the reason being was about, 8 years now, where robo advisors were really coming up. So robo advisors were, kind of like the digitized version of financial advisors. And BlackRock really thought they were going to take over the world. And they were also using a ton of, BlackRock iShares ETF products. And so that was my first foray into fintech. I was like, oh, what is this world? You have these companies that are really, able to open accounts super fast, able to invest right away. And so that's really what opened my eyes to kind of fintech groups. Now I love my time at BlackRock. Like a ton of my friends are still at BlackRock or my friends now. And I did a global tour with them and it was amazing and really learned a lot. But really it was time to go to a smaller company and really more into that technology realm. And so I joined Apex Clearing, which is a digital broker that supported a lot the brokers like Robinhood, Betterment. So you think about these technology platforms that allowed investors to really just quickly invest their money and to do it in a way that's not a huge financial lift, right? Like you can buy half a share of Microsoft if you wanted. So they had these really cool technologies to do that. And what that really meant was opening up the access to investing. So democratizing investing, letting everyone from, my cousin who just graduated to invest the $5,000 that she just got, or even $1,000 to working with, millionaires. And so it really brought down the barriers to invest. I think, as I mentioned before, I'm always looking at, what are ways that these firms can impact users and open up access. And that's also what brought me then to Vestwell. So Vestwell is a 401k platform, a digital 401k platform that allows small businesses to offer these retirement saving vehicles to their employees. And so you can think like Betty's Cupcakes down the street. It was such a pain for them to offer these retirement solutions, 401ks, to their employees before, because it's like you had to fill out a ton of paperwork. It just took forever to do. They didn't understand. It's a very complicated process. And what Vessel really did was streamline the whole process to make it super easy and digital and easy to understand from like, Betty, owner of Cupcake Store's perspective. She doesn't know anything about 401ks for financial services. What's really interesting too is that the government also is now requiring, or in some instances, some states, employers to offer retirement solutions. And that's going to benefit everyone, right? So again, as someone who's a first gen coming from the US, my parents immigrated from Vietnam. They owned a restaurant. They never had these type of retirement or savings vehicles. And you can see it today, right? Like they they owned a restaurant. They put everything they had into a restaurant. Their employees were their siblings, but like they weren't offered these solutions, these ways to save more. And so now we're kind of at this point where I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do for the retirement? And so that really led me to, the problem that Summer's trying to solve. So Summer is a platform really helping those that have student loan reduce the amount of student loan that they have, and even in some cases have it forgiven. And the reason why Summer's so cool is that all these programs are government programs. So you can imagine if you're, you work for a nonprofit and you have $200,000 in student loans because you went to Vanderbilt or something, which is now $100,000 a year. You're like, great, I know all these programs exist. How am I supposed to find them? Am I supposed to go on these like 10 government websites and download their PDFs and then fill them out and then send them to an email? It's just too much. It's a lot to think about and a lot to do. So what Summer does is it consolidates all these student loan programs from the government and then facilitates the information flow out. So it really helps remove the friction in terms of finding what these programs are and also applying for them. And they're also now moving into the world of matching a student loan match for 401ks. And that's, kind of another way for people to continue to save for retirement. So now if you're paying $500 to your student loan, your employer can also pay $500 to your 401k. So now you also can start saving for retirement. You can imagine like the impact that has on someone, compounding impact of these investments over time.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think student loan debt, obviously you hear it on all these surveys and kind of anecdotally from people, our age, younger, but even I'd say our parents' age, right? Millennials parents have taken on a lot of debt to help their kids go to school. And it's preventing a lot of them from, household formation, being able to buy a home, being able to really live comfortably. It is certainly a unique type of debt because, I think back to high school, right? And you were told, hey, you can do anything you want, but just go to college. It doesn't matter what you study, just go to college. And that's how you be successful. When, the reality is there's a lot of other ways to be successful. In fact, look at some of the richest people in the world. Like they either dropped out or didn't go to college. And it's really, I think a huge need. I think companies probably wanted to do it too. And Secure Act is really what allowed you guys to roll this out, right?
Yeah. Secure Act definitely on the 401k match. And a lot of companies too, they're like, look, our employees need this. They want this. And we know like all the good things behind it. The other thing too is looking at these companies, because the employees want it, it's a really great tool from a recruiting perspective. So like coming out of college, what are you going to focus on right away? Like where you live, what your job is, what are you doing for fun? And, oh wait, how much do I have to pay down in debt because I just got out of college? That starts, within 9 months of when you leave college. And then also from a retention standpoint, there's so much turnover that's happening in the world today. We just started working with a vet company, and they're seeing they have so much turnover in vets. Vets also historically have so much student debt because you can imagine undergrad, graduate school to become a vet. And it's costing this company, close to $500,000 when a vet leaves. So you can imagine a program like this that instated that helps these vets kind of really figure out how to reduce that student loan, and that will help with the retention. And also just think about like, kind of helps with all kind of areas of wellness, financial wellness, mental wellness, right? If you don't have this huge debt hanging over your head, there's a lot of focus right now on like mental health, and debt is a root cause of that.
Do you have any specific numbers that you can put to those, that retention problem? I think that's something is really interesting to me, and some of my friends across the league are talking about. If you look at the NIL space, so the college athlete space, the retention problem is actually pretty similar. Like they have guys flying into the transfer portal and they can't have guys stay for 4 years. And so they're looking at different ways to solve that retention problem as well. And I think we can get into it there, but would love, if you have any hard numbers there, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we've historically seen across employees, the retention, they've been able to retain at a 20% rate, more so given the fact that they're offering a program like this. And so that they've seen that 20% more people stay in their roles with a program, a student loan assistance program. And this is through platform or organizations that we worked with to offer this service.
That's amazing.
Which is huge.
That's there.
Yeah, huge,
exactly.
huge. I know at one point in my career, we had one of those early student, this was well before Secure Act, but one of those student loan repayment solutions where the employer would pay somewhere around $165 a month, went to your principal, and then you got that as long as you were an employee there. And of course, there was some sort of cap. But I'll be honest, when I switched jobs, I got a new job. I made a lot more. I was in a arguably much better location. This was one of those things that I was like, well, do I really want to give up that benefit? And it's only $165 a month. I was making way more where I went, but just the feeling that, hey, your employer cares about you and is doing what is in their power to make your situation better, I think makes employees a lot more loyal as well.
Yeah, 100%. It is the combination of, hey, how can employers actually help you pay down? Like there's a ton of employers who are now like, here's $10,000, pay it into your student loan. This is, kind of a signing bonus per se, but it goes directly to your student loan. So there's a lot of benefits to offering and helping out, because it is a huge benefit, right? Like even though the amount may not be huge, it's still the thought of like, my employer is supporting me. My employer is helping me, something that could be a big significant part of my financial path and story down the line.
I think overcoming that stickiness is what we were talking about. And it's kind of one of the spirits of what we want to bring out of the podcast, right? Is you're in that 9 to 5, you have all those benefits, you become reliant, you become comfortable. Was there a moment where you took that career, or you noticed all of those things and you made that jump, and you put just the accountability, you pushed all the chips in on Michelle? Is there a point in your career there that you can talk to?
Yeah, I've definitely done that. I mean, I think it was really hard to leave BlackRock. BlackRock is such a great organization, and kind of leaping from BlackRock to a smaller firm, that was a hard transition, right? Like it's going from like BlackRock to startup space where you're like, oh wait, let me call my marketing team. Wait, there's no marketing team. You are the marketing team. At one of the startups where I led business development, Harness Wealth, we were literally in a room of 8 people. And the first thing they were like, great, head of BD. I'm like, fantastic. Here's my strategy, blah, 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 blah. They're like, can you get us a phone number? I was like, okay, I can do that. I can get us a phone number. Like there was no phone number yet. So there's all these and that's one of the fun things about being at a smaller company, is that you are really rolling up your sleeves. So to that, I also want to speak about Crest Collective. So I recently launched Crest Collective, which is a platform for fractional C-suites to work with startups from the C to Series A space. Well, I was seeing in the market. So I do fractional work myself, in addition to working with Summer and other organizations and advising. And what I've really noticed, though, is there's so many different fractional people who do. Josh, you've done it, right? Like you work with these various different companies because you have years of experience within certain industries, and you are able to help these startups just grow exponentially quick at a fractional of the price and a fractional of the time. And that there is a big opportunity to combine all these different fractional CXOs together. And then startups too didn't quite know who to call, right? They could call, if they knew me, they could call me for CRO work, but maybe they didn't know who to call for CMO or vice versa, or the person they called wasn't highly vetted. So really excited to launch Crest Collective with my partner Ann Coquette, and to really help streamline an infrastructure for fractional CXOs. But that's part of like, hey, putting, a lot of Michelle into one area. And this goes back to like the juggling, right? Like everyone's like, wait, you work full time and then you do this and then you do that and you do that and then you have 4 kids. But it is a full on juggle. And I will say, I don't go to bed early either. So I don't know if that's a tactical tip or because I know I should actually go to bed earlier, but I don't because I have a lot to do.
We'll talk about the segmenting of all those things, like, because it's really hard to go from one thing to another. Like if it's not clearly defined, and I'm hand up the biggest proponent of like go down a rabbit hole or I'm working on something and then I look up and 45 minutes later I didn't get it done. So you have to be hyper vigilant on like, okay, I'm doing this from 2 to 4. I'm doing this from 5:30 to 7:30. How do you go in and out of wearing those different hats?
Yeah, I definitely segment my day, because, going context switching is really tough. So the bulk of my day is focused on summer. And then there's certain cadence of the day. So the bulk of my day is focused on summer. And then I have the kids. And then the evening is a mix of everything else. So it's a mix of, NYC Fintech Women. It's a mix of Crest Collective. It's a mix of going back to finishing stuff from summer because you guys know how it goes, right? You're in meetings all day long. And then also, adding to the list, I also am launching Crest Collective, which is a platform to support Asian female tech leaders. So there's a lot of kind of more visibility that we need to give to Asian female tech leaders. They make up Asian population makes up about 30% of the tech worker population, but only about 5% are in the exec level. So what we're really trying to do is, and that's 1% is female. So what we're really trying to do is bring out these stories. So similar to kind of like what you guys are doing with the podcast. But that's kind of like my night hours that I really spend. And, frankly, a lot of some weekend time too is spent on it. But it's also like, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't love it. I'll say that.
Yeah, I don't think you could work that hard unless you really loved it. We were talking about literally this morning while I was driving into the office here is, how I approach that is I'll kind of break it up through the day and almost have mini shifts, if you will, where I'm really focused on one, aspect of my job, whether it's a product development thing, if it's an operational thing or a sales related thing, and just be able to keep my mind in the right mindset for that. Because I find if I go, say 8 hours throughout the day trying to jump from product development to sales to marketing, it just your brain isn't as tuned in to kind of the topic at hand. So that's one of the ways I approach that.
Yeah, it makes you less efficient if you're like jumping all over the place. But that's a good way to go about it.
It does. I think the Crest Collective thing is definitely needed, and I'm really glad that you went down that path because, to your point, you have an idea as a founder, right? You're sitting in a cube somewhere, and you make that jump on your own. Well, you know a lot about one thing, but you might not know about how to run a business, how to market that business, how to manage people. So I think having that one-stop shop of pre-vetted, experienced people is going to be a huge value to the startup founder community. How are you going about marketing that, getting that out to the market?
Yeah, so we are we have about 20 founding members right now. And it's not going to be like this massive hundreds and hundreds of people because they're highly vetted. But we are talking to a number of banks that focus on startups, law firms, accelerators that are focused on startups, and VCs of a certain stage. So not like the Sequoias or the A16Zs, but like the kind of the smaller funds who don't have support for their portfolio companies. So there's a lot of interest in the startup space and also the market, right? This, right now where we are from a funding perspective, funding is still down comparatively to 2021, 2022. You could argue those years were like crazy blips in the market from a fundraising perspective, but startups just don't have, a full that cash to spend on a full FTE with that level of experience. And also they're a little bit risk adverse to say, hey, should we bring on someone right now at that price point? If we can just hire someone to, be with us for 3 to 6 months and really focus on the problem that we're trying to solve. Is it growth hacking? Is it building a pipeline? Is it building a product roadmap? Is it fundraising even? So having folks who can stealthily go in and be able to help them really focus on a particular goal or problem they're trying to solve. It's been really interesting to hear the amount of interest from a lot of companies.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think as an investor, right, the VC angle makes a ton of sense. If you're investing in a company, you want to make sure they're successful. I think you probably can always identify one weak link on any team, and that allows you to kind of bring in and provide a solution to maybe that weak link in a very quick, easy, non kind of long-term committal way. And hey, maybe there's a great relationship and you end up hiring the person full time, but
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
hugely valuable. And I know you are coming up on time, Michelle. So just one last thing, like, what advice would you give to someone, given your experience, given, how you work with founders today, but have kind of seen, companies in the case of like Vestwell really grow and, go through multiple rounds of funding? Say someone's sitting in their cubicle in their office and just wants to do something else. What's your advice for them to get started, to get over the hump?
So I think one is really think through what's the problem you're trying to solve and test it out, right? Talk to 1,000 people, tons of people, everyone within your network or outside your network. And don't be afraid to make that ask, because people love hearing new ideas. People love, kind of supporting folks who want to take that step out, because it's a very scary step. When you're in a 9 to 5 or just a regular job, you have all the comforts of benefits, you have a steady paycheck. And so to make the leap to say, hey, I think there's a really cool idea. How do I do it in a kind of a less riskier way to start before I fully jump into it? Because I think there's this perception of like, okay, I want to be a founder, I need to throw all my eggs in the basket. You don't. You can slow walk it once to the point where you have an idea. But I would say test and test and test and refine your pitch over time. And that's also a great way to network too, because as you're refining the pitch and talking to folks, building out your network from potential angel investors or other investors, but also kind of helps you frame out, what is that actual problem you're trying to solve and what do you want to build. So I definitely say, spend more time than you think you should doing that to really flush out the idea. But look, there's a ton of support out there too for those who are ready to take the leap. There's investors waiting to cut checks. I know you are tight on like Crest ready to help support it. And there's probably, a lot of folks who are ready just to give advice within your network. Working with a couple of friends right now, they have these ideas and they just need to talk through it with somebody who, while I don't know the space exactly, I can ask questions like, have you thought about the total addressable market? Who's your ideal client profile? Have you thought about like your investing? Like, what do you need to stand this up? So there's like all these questions that they don't know to ask themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot that goes into starting it, and having everything flushed out on the front end saves you a lot of money, saves investors money along the way, and to your point, helps you to build that network. And I've heard stories of founders that maybe it was a no on that early kind of pitch, but it got that relationship, and then they said that VC said, oh well, I know someone who would actually be a good fit, and got that relationship that way. So even though it might be a dead end there, it might open the door somewhere else.
Yep. Network.
Great. Well, I know you are tight on time today, Michelle, so I want to be respectful of that and certainly appreciate you joining us. Zach, anything else before we close out?
No, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast. I think my biggest takeaway was the juggle versus balancing. Sometimes the balance is impossible. So like you put one ball in the air, you're holding two, and then it's time to change really quickly. So that's my biggest takeaway. I appreciate your context there.
Exactly. No, thank you guys for having me. Really appreciative of the conversation and what you guys are trying to do as you get a sneak peek of me moving offices. This is the work from home juggle, right?
Love it. Yeah.
One good office. We have to put in our time cards for each office. But
the 2020s now, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. Thank you guys for having me. Super excited for the conversations that you guys are going to have in the future. I know there's a lot more to come.